Hello, good afternoon. It's Imogen here with Body Intelligence, and I am joined today by Shay Seaborne to continue our discussion of compassionate witnessing. So, Shay is a good friend of mine. She's been a client since 2017 ish, maybe.
Yeah.
um, and she's a trauma survivor and a trauma awareness activist. And we have been collaborating this past year, almost about exactly a year
Mm.
from our first kind of workshop together, to do workshops and offer courses for people dealing with chronic stress and trauma. So, welcome, Shay.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Um, so, what we want to do today is go into a little bit more of the do's and don'ts, if you like, of compassionate witnessing, and especially where we can kind of have compassionate witnessing fails, often from the best of intentions, not always, but often. Um, 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 and then offer what we can do instead. So, if you haven't watched our first video and you don't really know what compassionate witnessing is, can you explain in one sentence, perhaps, Jay?
Probably not one sentence. It is
Briefly.
it is the ability to be with a person and listen to them and connect with them at the neurophysiological level, so that you are experiencing a little bit of their inner experience, and sharing that with them. And whether that's a joyful thing or a sorrowful thing, um, it's beneficial to both of us to share those neurophysiologically.
Yeah, so it's a moment or moments of a meaningful connection between two or more, I suppose, but
Mhm.
people. Um, so you've identified three key features of what we might call compassionate witnessing fails. So can you tell us what they are and a bit about them?
Sure. I consider the wide variety of fails under three main headings: dismissal and minimizing and victim blaming. Um,
Mm,
and I love David Bedrick's work on these things. He calls his work unshaming, and he mentions that when we have these witnessing fails, he says shame is created when someone shares intimate details about their experience, including their feelings and stories, and the listener and witness does these things. And he gives a list of quite a variety, and to me they fit under these three headings. So we have some examples uh,
yeah.
that
So
some are his, because they were so good, very
yeah.
easy to
So
use.
so what would be examples of dismissal? We'll start with that
Well,
one.
jumping to a fix or advice, without taking the time to listen and give them the space to really, what you're doing is you're helping them process something that's difficult, and they need space to do that and time to do that, and you're basically abiding with them, sitting with them, not
Would you
trying to
say that?
change them.
Would you say when you jump straight to, oh, well, you should do this or something like that, that one of the things that you're skipping is that you haven't paused even to acknowledge the,
Mhm.
I'm assuming in this case, the suffering, the hurt, or whatever the experience is. I mean, even with something joyful, we can jump in a way that takes away
Mhm.
that joyful experience, right? So,
Yeah, yeah, and that's the whole point, is having that experience together.
mm,
People often, especially if it's a difficult story, people will often jump to a fix because they're not comfortable sitting with
yeah,
discomfort themselves. So if you
And
recognize that you do this or somebody you know does this, that's a sign that they have their own issues that they need to work on to feel comfortable with their own sad feelings and experiences.
so what might be other ways that the dismissal happens, that you feel dismissed rather than witnessed?
Well,
Yeah.
one of the most common I've seen is the sort of the pat on the back dismissal. Like it comes from a place kind of like a vote of confidence. You got this is a big one. You got this. It means basically I don't have to connect with you or engage with you in any way or sympathize with you. I just have so much confidence in you. I can abandon you, basically, is what it's saying. And again, that's from somebody who can't connect with their own.
Might there be a place for that at some point? I mean,
I don't think so. And I don't think in compassionate witnessing, I mean, that, you got this is not always inappropriate. There are times when it is appropriate. Yes, but for compassionate witnessing, no. No, that's like, if I got this, I wouldn't be bringing it to you. Hello.
Yeah.
Another one is, this is one of David's, bringing up forgiveness before the person has even, told their story or processed any of it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. So
a lot of people believe in forgiveness and think that it should be a goal or a priority, and that it's a necessity, that you can't heal without forgiveness, and that if you don't forgive, you're corroding yourself from the inside and all those things, which isn't necessarily true. I could go on and on about forgiveness, but
maybe we'll do another video about forgiveness.
Yes, but the point is, don't be, if you're pushing somebody or bringing up forgiveness, you're not compassionate witnessing.
And that's going to advice.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
It's leaping past what's actually happening right now.
Yeah.
And then the other one, some people just will ignore. This happens to me a lot. In part because my story's so overwhelming. Very few people can handle it, even when I give little bits, that I'll give a tiny bit, and instead of any response, they just go, oh, well, this weekend this is happening, or something like total non sequitur, like they didn't even hear it. And again,
so they've just jumped to something else completely different.
Yeah, and that's, again, a protective. I used to get offended at that, and now I realize, oh, that's their neurophysiology saying, I can't deal with that, for whatever their reasons are that have nothing to do with me.
I have to just say, I was distracted for a second because we were getting, I don't know if you saw it, I don't know if the people who are watching, if you're watching, saw it, but there was like a little Wi-Fi symbol appearing on the screen.
Strange.
But anyway,
maybe you were looking at a comment or something there.
Yeah. Funny. Anyway, so the next one was minimizing. You want to say a bit more about that?
Yeah, that is also, that's actually highly toxic. All these things are actually really toxic to the individual who needs the witnessing, and even to the person who has this response. If this is your any of these are your typical responses, then it's actually harming you to respond to people this way, because you're blocking your own feelings, and you're missing out on something that's really important and beautiful and necessary. So minimizing would be saying that it's not that bad, that's life, maybe comparing it to someone else.
Would at least it's not blah blah blah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
At least we'll beware of at least.
Yeah, that's a terrible dismissal. Yes, or saying that someone else has it worse, which is another. At least it's not.
Saying that using words.
And the third category is the victim blaming. My personal least favorite. that occurs when oftentimes somebody really thinks they're trying to be helpful by saying things like, well, you should have done this, or why didn't you do that? Because they would do that from where they are with their cognitive thinking abilities that are happening to them with their lived history, not any of yours.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes that can even go to the extent of, well, what did you do to make them, hit you or whatever?
Yeah.
That's some of the most obvious. But David points out that also a kind of victim blaming is uh, trying to get the victim to have compassion for the perpetrator. Hurt people hurt people. You don't understand. Maybe they had a hard time too.
I'm thinking that, again, that's jumping to not being with their experience. There might be a place at some point where this person, and maybe they even do already have compassion for the perpetrator if it's a situation like that. But again, it's jumped rather than being with.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And that person needs you to be, that person doesn't need any answers, doesn't need any fixes, doesn't need any solutions at that point. They just need to see your nervous system, seeing them and witnessing their internal state, and showing them that you feel bad about that and you would like to help them feel better. Oh yeah, one of my favorites too, the karma's a bitch. That's a victim blaming too, or even the idea that God has a plan for you, or everything happens for a reason. There's a lot of spiritual bypassing that's actually victim blaming, that's passed around as spiritual advice or spiritual facts. And when it comes to spirituality, everything's really an opinion. It's really hard to prove any of that, so it's a belief and an opinion. But
and even I think it's important for people to know you might be coming from a really good place by saying these, but realize that this is not how it will be received. It will be the will feel blamed or minimized or dismissed or shamed, which is not compassionate witnessing. So.
No. And I think a lot of times people say these things because they believe them, and they probably worked for them. So they expect that they would work for other people. And that, again, is not being with the person. That's projecting your experience on somebody else. All of these things are a kind of emotional abandonment, a disconnection, an avoiding of the connection that the person who's sharing truly needs, and the person who witnesses can also greatly benefit from.
I just want to say, I see there are some comments, and if there's things we need to respond to, we will definitely do that later. So thanks we really appreciate your comments and feedback. So I wanted to go now to just some kind of quicker do's and don'ts. We've kind of gone into a bit more detail about why and these 3 key ways in which we can fail at compassionate witnessing. I wanted to mention a concept that I've learned about recently that I think could be helpful in this context. And it's the idea, I think it comes from Buddhism originally, but it's the concept of near enemy and far enemy. And so when we're thinking of compassion or compassionate witnessing in this case, the far enemy is like when people overtly and openly show you contempt, hatred, whatever, it's extremely overt, and everyone would agree that that's not compassion.
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, um, Near enemies are more subtle, and they include some of the things we've already talked about. But it's something that might appear on the surface to be very like or compassionate witnessing, but actually in reality undermines the connection,
Mm-hmm.
the witnessing to happen. So that could be like someone saying, oh, everything happens for a reason, and
Mm-hmm.
they're trying to console you, but the
Right.
effect actually undermines connection.
Yes. Yes. It
Yeah.
that's called efforting an agenda, and
Mm-hmm.
I learned about this from NARM therapy, uh, and efforting. We all have our agenda. Really, I want you to feel better. I want you to be
Mm-hmm.
happy. I want to see you thrive. I want to
Mm-hmm.
feel better too, of course. Um, and I might also have like try to make you feel better. Come on, Imogen, stop feeling bad. Uh, and if I,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. In Alexander technique, which is background and training, we have the concept of end gaining, and that's
Mhm.
putting the end result we want ahead of the process. And that
Yes,
seems to be what you're describing.
yes, yes, just
Yeah.
different wording, a little bit of different
Mhm,
angle for the same thing. And the thing about this efforting and agenda, we all have it, and we all need to be aware of it, especially if we're trying to help other people, especially doctors and psychologists. Hello, that the thing is, it thwarts the process of that person. If you're
mhm,
just saying, "Oh, you got this," their process is stopped. There's nothing they can do to continue what needs to unfold for them, and the antidote is to deeply trust the process, and that means trust
mhm,
what's happening in them and
mhm.
between you, and
Yeah.
that's really
Being with
difficult.
what is, not,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, and
yeah,
that's really difficult for a lot of us because in our culture we're taught very much the opposite.
yeah, yeah. So some quick don'ts. So do you just have it very clear? It would be things like don't try and fix, don't advise, don't be solutions oriented. I guess that's that efforting.
Hmm.
Don't use pat phrases. We've
Yeah,
given
like
you a
hang
few
in there, don't say hang in there.
um, don't change the subject. um, so, any other kind of just quick things like that you can think of?
Yeah, I would also specifically mention unsolicited spiritual advice, even though we have other advice in there,
Mhm,
because that can be especially painful for people who have spiritual trauma, um,
mhm,
uh, or yeah, or just feel like they were God's
mhm,
cosmic punching clown. It,
mhm. So, having said everything that you shouldn't do, we're going to come to just kind of run through what I actually don't like the word should, but in this case, what is compassionate witnessing? What should we do when we're a compassionate witness? In fact, I've put listen as the first thing on that list.
Mhm.
So listen, be curious, be with the other person without the agenda, without the efforting, without trying to find a solution. I think that's so. Listen, be curious, be with, trust the process. We were just talking about that.
Mhm.
We're holding space for the other person to be in their process too. Um, yeah. Um,
That's a
um,
highly valuable um, capability. Uh, uh, I had an issue a couple of years ago with a therapist who dismissed when I was telling her that my body was saying I might not make it, and she said, "Oh, that's just one of your parts," and blew it off. And so I was revisiting that now with my current therapist and psychologist, just to see like, well, what if I was bringing this to you? How different would it be? And Emily, my NARM therapist, just said, "Oh, I just heard you say that your body's saying that it might not make it." That's all she said, and it was like something opened up. Like, that tiny little bit of recognition was all I needed to feel heard.
So she basically acknowledged right back to you that she had heard and understood what you'd said.
Mm-hmm. That tiny little thing. She didn't have to go into her feelings or
Mm-hmm.
worry about, well, what if I was actually dying, or what if I did die, or any of those
Mm-hmm.
things. It was all just reflecting back to me what I said, being there with me enough to hear it and say it back.
Mm-hmm.
It was huge. It can be transformative.
Um, um, in the on the do side of things, I've put on the list is have boundaries, because I think this is where a lot of things go wrong. A lot of the don'ts, what of the fails happen is when we don't have this clear boundary about this is me,
Mm-hmm.
that is the other person. I'm being present with them, but I clearly know who is who and what is um uh yeah.
Yeah, that's a
Anything.
really important point. One that I feel is central. That we, when we understand the neurobiology, and we are in touch with our own internal process, we can recognize. You say something to me about a tragedy you've endured, and I have this very strong feeling in it. It might be activating. It might feel like, I want to get up and run, or I want to go punch somebody for what they did to you, or I might just feel really sad. I might have a very strong internal reaction to your experience, but that's not feeling your feelings. That's my response, and when I know that, I can appreciate it and go, wow, I had a really strong response. And I can even say that, Imogen, that
Mhm.
that just affected me so much when you said that, and I'm very moved, however. And that's really what you need to know. You don't need me to come up with some fancy words or anything. Just what really relating what I'm noticing in my body.
And when we are with someone and present, it can be non-verbal. We can see people's facial expression. You put your hand here, which is something we kind of end up doing in our study group a lot. But we can feel from that uh, heard and seen, and
Yes.
you know.
And that's what
Um,
it's about.
so in the to do in the do's side of things, awareness is very important. Staying aware of yourself, and that connects with the boundaries and the space between. Um, um, it's important to be aware of your own state if you're getting um, dysregulated, or maybe from the get-go, I come in from some other thing and I can't listen. I'm not in
Mm-hmm.
the place where I can offer because I've got too much going on in me.
Mm-hmm.
That's really important to know, rather than kind of trying to fake it, and
Yes.
then more than likely some of these other things are going to come out, right?
Yeah. And one of the things we can do, being aware of our internal state in a situation like you described, is we can, with some practice and um, understanding, be able to regulate ourselves enough to become that compassionate witness, particularly if a hug is appropriate. Just a 30-second hug, especially with the intention of co-regulation, can dramatically shift the internal state of both people, or more if it's a 3 or 4-way hug or whatever. It seems to me, from my experience, the more people involved, the faster and more dramatic the downregulation can be.
Yeah, I think it's important. Another thing on the do list is you don't just go in and hug. You
No.
ask, as you would ask for any. There might become a point, for instance, where you've listened and you've been with, and you do have some idea that you think might be helpful to the other person, but you don't go in there with your solution, but
Yes.
you ask, would you like to hear? I've thought of something that helped me when I had something similar. Would you like to know about it? Or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. And be willing to, if they say, no, I'm not ready right now, or
Yeah.
to
And you can
drop it.
yes, yeah, you still need to leave your ego on the side there, to be with them. Where's I going with that? Yeah, you can use their follow their lead in that. When they get to the point where they're going, gosh, I wonder what I'm going to do, that's a good time to offer. But as long as they're still crying or talking about it, that's not the time.
Which is we've been talking quite a time. I'm just going to briefly mention some of these other aspects which we have touched on, which is, if you notice that you're not in the state where you can be calm and listen and be with, that it is time to remove yourself from the situation, which you can do kindly. You can just say, I really want to be here for you, but I've got this going on. I'll call you back in an hour, or whatever works,
And actually, I'd like to say that can actually even be a very quick short-term aid. Sometimes I was in a heated conversation with a state official a while back, and the responses I was getting from that side were so crazy making that I could feel myself getting janked up. And so I said, okay, this is really distressing my nervous system. And that was the name it to tame it principle from interpersonal neurobiology. When you speak aloud what your internal state is, your brain secretes soothing chemicals that help you calm down. So I said that, and I could feel like a little downshift, and that was enough. And also it took the focus off my distress and put it on, the cognitive and saying it, and that helped me come back up the ladder. And then I could go on and finish the conversation reasonably calm, just from that one little recognition of what was going on, verbally expressed.
So I think this goes along with the idea. So many of these things, we practice ways of doing these things in our study group, but we practice pausing. And this is, you demonstrated then, in a way that was like a little pause to group out of the situation. So you may notice, the person you're witnessing is getting more and more distressed, and you're finding it extremely distressing, and that you need to pause to give yourself a moment of calm. But you can also offer, again, ask, but offer, I need to pause now just for a moment, just so I can be here properly for you. But maybe, would you like to pause as well? Something like that.
I actually do that. I will say I'd like to pause and do a mindfulness practice, and you're welcome to join me if you like. I do this with my doctors even, and usually they'll join me, and they notice a difference too.
I think that's great. Yeah. I'm just looking. I think we've covered everything there. To kind of key points that we'd like you to take from this fairly long video at this point. But is to not be solutions oriented, that you don't have, it's kind of a giving up of your own agenda to be with the other person, and just to be curious, and you're kind of giving them the gift of your non-judgmental attention.
And in return, you're getting the gift of this really special connection that becomes an internalized resource. When we have these kind of exchanges with people, it solidifies not only the connections between us, but the connections within us. And this is actually involved with integrating the brain, and the same neural pathways that we use for compassionate witnessing are the same neural pathways we also use to regulate our nervous system.
So it's not
Inspiring.
it's not just, in quotes, something you're doing for something else. It's something we're doing for each other and for ourselves, and yeah, it's mutually beneficial. I think this is probably good to wrap this up
Yes.
now. I do want to mention, if you're looking for ways to calm your nervous system this holiday season, I'm doing rest session on Zoom next Wednesday. That's the winter solstice, so I'll do something special for that. But it's just half an hour, and it's a time to help you release excess tension, relieve stress, feel a little bit calmer within
Get that
yourself.
little brain break so that you're not
Get
stuck
that
in
little brain break.
holiday
Yeah.
mode.
Yeah. And it might help you listen to someone else's difficult. And Shay and I do have our next 4-week course coming up starting in January on the 21st. That's Foundations of Regulation. That's coming up. If you're interested, I'll pop that underneath the video. So thank you for those of you who've been watching with us live, or if you've watched the replay, we'll take a proper look at your comments afterwards. And thank you for being with us. And thank you, Shay.
Thank you, Imogen. Thank you,
All
everybody.
right.